Black woman's child was brutalized by cops. She brought the whole department to court. The scream sliced through the thick summer air like a blade. "Get your hands off my daughter!" Danielle Brooks shouted, her heels slamming against the hot concrete as she sprinted toward the gas station parking lot. The late afternoon sun bounced off windshields and sweat-slicked foreheads, but all Danielle saw was her 12-year-old Ava, curled on the pavement, a white officer's knee pressed against her small back. People watched, but no one moved. Someone fumbled for their phone, others just stared. Ava's voice was a broken whimper. "Please, I didn't do anything." Danielle dropped to her knees beside her daughter, her arms outstretched. "I'm her mother. Get off her right now." Officer Ryan Callahan didn't flinch. His partner, Officer Tate, stood back with one hand near his holster, eyes scanning the growing crowd like they were a threat. "She matched the description of a robbery suspect," Callahan said coldly. "Step back, ma'am." "She's 12, Danielle's voice cracked. "And she's wearing a school uniform. What part of her matches a damn robbery suspect?" But they didn't move. Ava was crying now, her face pressed into the pavement, knees scraped raw. Danielle could see the bruise swelling on her temple. Blood had matted her curly hair at the scalp. Danielle's fingers clenched around her phone in her coat pocket. She hit record. Her voice changed, lower now, firmer, deadly calm. "What's your badge number?" Callahan looked down, annoyed, but not surprised. "Ma'am, for your safety, I suggest you step back. You're interfering with a police investigation." "That's my child," Danielle snapped. "She's 12. You tackled her. You slammed her into the pavement. I will not step back. You're going to let her go, and then you're going to call an ambulance. Now." Tate moved slightly forward. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time." And then Ava vomited. Right there, on the pavement. That stopped everything. Callahan's face twitched. For the first time, he looked unsure. "Shit." He stood up quickly, wiping his hands on his pants like she'd infected him. Tate pulled out his radio and called for medical. Danielle didn't wait. She cradled Ava's head, her voice suddenly a whisper in her daughter's ear. "I got you, baby. I'm here. Mama's here." Paramedics arrived within minutes. Ava was barely conscious by then. The EMTs loaded her onto a stretcher. Danielle rode in the ambulance, silent except for the soft way she held her daughter's hand and kept whispering, "I'm with you. I won't let them get away with this." At the hospital, doctors confirmed a concussion, cracked ribs, and a shoulder sprain. But Danielle didn't cry. She just listened. Listened to the doctors talk around her, watched as a hospital social worker tiptoed into the room and asked if she'd like to speak to a liaison from the police department. "No," Danielle said, her voice flat. "I'll be speaking to them very soon, but not the way you think." That night, she sat beside Ava's hospital bed, her laptop open. She wasn't researching trauma protocols. She was digging into Callahan and Tate's records, disciplinary reports, use of force complaints, whispers in chat rooms, Reddit threads, and watchdog forums. What she found made her breath catch in her throat. This wasn't the first time, not even close. And in each case, the victims looked like her daughter. Black, young, vulnerable. In some cases, their parents didn't speak English. Some were undocumented. Others were dismissed because of inconclusive footage, or because the department conducted an internal review and found no wrongdoing. She scrolled, eyes sharp, absorbing every detail. And then she pulled out her second phone, the secure line, and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. "Hey, it's Danielle Brooks." A pause. Then a woman's voice answered with a mix of disbelief and caution. "Danielle, what the hell? Where have you been? Are you okay?" Danielle's voice was razor sharp now. I need you. I need the old team. I'm filing a federal case. There was silence, then a slow whistle. Let me guess, they messed with the wrong woman. Danielle looked over at Ava, still unconscious. They brutalized my daughter, she said, her voice shaking now, not with fear but with fury. And I'm going to bring down the entire department. The next morning, the Atlanta Police Department released a press statement. It was full of carefully curated phrases. Incident under review. Officers responded appropriately. Ongoing investigation. They didn't name Ava. They didn't name Danielle. But they called the situation unfortunate. That was all Danielle needed. She walked into the hospital lobby in a black pantsuit, natural curls tied back, eyes dark with purpose. Reporters were already gathering outside. Someone had leaked the incident footage. Someone had posted Ava's battered face. Danielle didn't speak to them. Not yet. She had bigger plans. She handed a manila envelope to a courier waiting at the door. Signed a formal letter of intent to sue the Atlanta Police Department and the City of Atlanta for civil rights violations, excessive force, and institutionalized cover-up culture. And that was just the beginning. Because Danielle Brooks didn't just want justice for her daughter. She wanted justice for every child whose voice had been silenced by a badge. And she wasn't going to stop until the entire system was forced to face her. Face them, and this time they would not be able to look away. Danielle stared at her reflection in the hospital bathroom mirror. The fluorescent lights cast a sterile glow over her face, but the fire in her eyes burned too fiercely to be dulled. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear but from the sheer weight of what she was about to do. She'd once been the youngest assistant district attorney in Fulton County. Brilliant, relentless, and precise. But after the wrongful conviction of a teenage boy she couldn't save, despite knowing he was innocent, Danielle had walked away. Not out of defeat, but because she knew she had to fight differently. Now that part of her, the old warrior, was fully awake again. When she stepped out of the bathroom, her phone buzzed with messages from old colleagues. Some offered quiet support. Others sent screenshots. The video of Ava's assault had gone viral overnight. The clip, barely 42 seconds, had already sparked outrage, particularly among black parents. She opened the link. It was grainy, but the scene was unmistakable. Her daughter in a yellow polo and khaki skirt, backpack slung awkwardly, walking across the lot. Then, without warning, the officers descended. Ava screamed. People gasped. One man muttered, "Jesus Christ, she's just a kid." Danielle's jaw clenched. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She saved the video to 3 separate drives. Back at home later that day, she pulled an old black file box from the closet. Inside were photos, clippings, notes she'd kept from her time in the DA's office. She laid out each name, each face of a young victim whose parents never got justice, and she whispered something like a promise. Not this time. Just then her doorbell rang. She expected it might be a reporter. Instead, it was someone she hadn't seen in 5 years. "Derek?" she said, stunned. Derek Lattimore had been one of the best investigators in the state, and once he had been more than that to her. Now he stood on her doorstep, hair grayer, eyes sharper. "I heard what happened," he said. "I'm in. Whatever you need." Danielle stepped aside without hesitation. "Come in." They spent the next 5 hours mapping everything they knew. Derek had contacts still on the force. He confirmed what Danielle feared. Officer Callahan had been protected for years. Internal Affairs had quietly closed multiple complaints. Most were labeled inconclusive. "They'll bury this," Derek said. "They've done it before." "Not with me involved," Danielle replied. She picked up a photo of Ava, smiling, gap-toothed, in her school band uniform. "They messed with the wrong kid." Danielle began drafting the lawsuit that night, but she wasn't just aiming for a payout. She wanted exposure. She wanted the deposition room, the trial, the media frenzy. She wanted sunlight. That's when the first threat arrived. An anonymous email, no name, no signature, just a subject line. Think twice. Danielle read it aloud to Derek. You come after us. We come after you. He looked up from his laptop. That came fast. She shrugged. Good. That means they're scared. But Derek didn't smile. Scared men do dangerous things. The next day, Danielle met with 3 attorneys she trusted, civil rights heavyweights from New York and LA. They offered to co-counsel. She agreed, but made one thing clear. I'm leading this. No settling. No gag orders. We go to court. We go public. They agreed, and so the plan was set in motion. Then something unexpected happened. The hospital called. They'd reviewed Ava's scans again. There was more damage than they originally thought. A tiny fracture near the orbital bone, possible nerve trauma. Ava would need surgery. Danielle's chest tightened, but she kept her face neutral. She thanked the doctor and hung up. She'll be okay, Derek said quietly. Danielle didn't answer. Instead, she took a deep breath and walked into Ava's room. Her daughter was finally awake, groggy from the meds, but alert. Mom? Danielle sat beside her and took her hand. Hey, baby, how you feeling? Ava blinked slowly. My face hurts. I know, sweetheart, but you're safe now, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what they did. Ava looked away, tears filling her eyes. Was it because I'm black? Danielle paused. Her throat tightened. Yes, she said softly, but that's not all you are. You're strong, you're brilliant, and you're going to be okay. Ava didn't say anything, but her tiny fingers squeezed her mother's hand. That night, Danielle held her daughter until she fell asleep. And then she got up, walked to her desk, and pulled up her case file. Names, incidents, photographs. She added Ava's name to the top of the list. The fight had already begun, but now it was personal. And Danielle Brooks? She wasn't backing down. Not for anything. Not for anyone. Danielle Brooks stood silently inside the courtroom gallery, watching as a line of blue uniforms filed past the glass windows, their boots echoing against the hallway tile. She hadn't been in this courthouse in years, not since the day she walked out after resigning from the DA's office. And yet everything felt eerily familiar. The smell of stale coffee and floor polish, the faint clatter of handcuffs from holding cells below, the unspoken hierarchy in every nod and glance. But this time she wasn't part of the system. She was the one holding it accountable. Across the street, inside a modest conference room, Danielle's legal team sat huddled around a thick binder. Derek Lattimore leaned over the deposition transcripts with a furrowed brow. They're already stonewalling, he muttered. Internal Affairs claims they never received a complaint about Ava's arrest. They're lying, said Marissa Chen, a civil rights attorney from San Francisco. I found 3 filed reports that mysteriously disappeared after Officer Callahan was promoted. Danielle walked in at that moment, her heels sharp against the linoleum. She dropped a folder on the table. I found a 4th, she said, from a teacher at another middle school. Same officer, same behavior. They threatened her job to keep quiet. Derek exhaled slowly. We're cracking through. Marissa raised an eyebrow, but the department's still stone-cold silent. You really think they'll cave before trial? Danielle looked at her. They won't have a choice. That afternoon, Danielle drove back to the hospital to be with Ava. Her daughter's eye was swollen, her cheek still purpled with bruises. But she smiled weakly when her mom walked in. Hey, warrior, Danielle whispered, brushing her hand across Ava's curls. Did you yell at them yet? Ava asked, voice groggy but playful. Every day, Danielle said, and tomorrow I'll do it louder. Ava giggled, but it quickly turned into a wince. Danielle's smile faltered. As she helped Ava sip water, her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. She stepped outside to answer. "This is Danielle Brooks." A gravelly voice replied, "You really want to do this, counselor?" Her eyes narrowed. "Who is this?" "Just someone who knows how this game is played. Back off, let it die." Danielle didn't flinch. "You messed with the wrong mother." The call disconnected. That night, she and Derek sat on her porch, sharing a bottle of water and silence. The cicadas hummed softly around them. "They're getting desperate," he said. "They should be." Derek turned to her. "You ever think maybe this fight is too big, that they'll try to bury you, ruin your name, your license?" Danielle looked out at the stars. "If I lose my name but Ava gets justice, I'll wear that like a crown." Suddenly, a car rolled by slowly, too slowly. Danielle's hand instinctively went to her waist. Derek noticed and stood. The car didn't stop. It disappeared into the night. They both knew the message was clear. By morning, social media had exploded. Someone leaked the footage of Ava's arrest to a national journalist. CNN picked it up. Then MSNBC. Twitter flooded with hashtags, #JusticeForAva and #StopPoliceAbuse. Danielle's phone rang nonstop. But the most surprising call came from the mayor's office. Mayor Karen Hastings was an ambitious, carefully composed politician, with a record of silence when it came to police conduct. But she was also up for re-election. Danielle took the call in her kitchen, surrounded by legal pads and coffee mugs. "Ms. Brooks," the mayor said, "this situation has evolved. I want to extend my deepest concern for your daughter." "Thank you, Mayor," Danielle replied coolly, "but I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm looking for accountability." "I understand. We'd like to open an independent review," Danielle chuckled softly. "You had 2 weeks to do that. Now I'm opening court." Mayor Hastings hesitated. "Danielle, I don't think you understand what you're about to unleash." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Danielle Yair said, "and for the first time in years. So will the city." Later that day, while reviewing records in her home office, Danielle stumbled on something that made her sit up straight. A document buried deep in personnel files. Officer Callahan had a sealed disciplinary case from his early days on the force. She called Marissa. "We need a subpoena. Now." "That's sealed," Marissa warned Ed. "We'd need cause." "We have cause, and motive, and pattern." It was a long shot, but Danielle had won on thinner odds before. That night, she and Derek went over strategy in the living room. "If we open that file," Derek said, "we might find something explosive, or we might hit a wall." Danielle's voice was firm. "We're not knocking. We're tearing the wall down." He looked at her, admiration mixing with worry. "You haven't changed a bit," she smiled. "Neither have they, and that's exactly why I'm going to win." A knock came at the door. Danielle froze. It was Ava's doctor. "I just wanted to stop by," he said, holding an envelope. This came through hospital security, addressed to you." Danielle took it slowly. Inside was a photo, her and Ava, taken from a distance. The message scribbled on the back read, "Back down or she won't be the last." Her grip tightened. She looked at the doctor. "Did you see who delivered this?" He shook his head. "No return, just dropped off." Danielle stared out the window into the dark. They were scared, good, because for the first time in her life, she wasn't. The courtroom was buzzing before the doors even opened. Outside, cameras flashed and protesters lined the steps with signs reading "Justice for Ava" and "Accountability Now." Inside, the gallery was packed with journalists, legal aides, and everyday citizens who had seen the video and could no longer look away. Danielle Brooks stepped into the courtroom in a tailored black suit, her curls pulled back, her jaw set. Every step echoed like a declaration. She wasn't just a mother now. She was a storm. At the defense table sat Officer Patrick Callahan, flanked by a smug defense attorney and two uniformed colleagues. His face was blank, but his eyes followed Danielle like he was watching a ticking bomb. Judge Meredith Vaughn, known for her stern demeanor, entered without looking up. "Court is now in session," she said. "Brooks v. City of Atlanta Police Department." Danielle didn't flinch at the sound of her own name. She stood as the lead counsel and the plaintiff, unorthodox but symbolic. Her team, Marissa and Derek, sat beside her, flipping through folders and motions. But this part Danielle had to do herself. "We're ready, Your Honor," she said clearly. The first twist of the day came faster than anyone expected. The defense filed a motion to suppress the newly subpoenaed personnel file Danielle had discovered. They claimed the file was irrelevant, prejudicial, and, according to their version, sealed due to clerical error, not disciplinary action. Danielle rose. "Your Honor, the city claims the file is irrelevant, yet it contains a prior complaint against Officer Callahan by another student from 6 years ago, a student who ended up hospitalized. That's not clerical. That's criminal." Judge Vaughn leaned forward. "Do you have proof of the connection?" Danielle held up a signed affidavit from the retired school nurse who treated the boy. "We do now." The judge took the folder from the bailiff, flipped through it in silence, then nodded. "Motion denied. The file stays." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Callahan's attorney stiffened. Outside the courtroom, a reporter caught the reaction and tweeted it. The hashtag #CallahanCoverUp began trending within the hour. Back in the courtroom, the trial moved forward. Danielle called her first witness, Miss Jefferson, Ava's middle school science teacher. Miss Jefferson stepped forward with trembling hands, but steady words. Ava was quiet, smart. She never caused trouble. That day she didn't do anything wrong, but Officer Callahan was already on edge. He accused her of resisting, but I didn't see any resistance. I saw fear. The defense tried to shake her, asking why she didn't intervene more directly. Ms. Jefferson's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was afraid, too." Danielle didn't press further. That one sentence was more powerful than any cross-examination. Then came the second surprise. As Marissa reviewed other school security footage from the previous year, she stumbled upon something unexpected. Another student in a different school being slammed against a locker. The officer's nameplate was obscured, but the posture, the build, it was Callahan. They tracked the student down. His name was Jamal Rivers. Now sin quiet, built like a linebacker, but when he spoke to Danielle, his voice cracked. "He told me if I told anyone, I'd end up like my cousin, locked up or worse." Danielle looked at him. "Are you ready to speak up?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I'm done being scared." When Jamal testified 2 days later, the courtroom was silent. Danielle asked softly, "Why didn't you report this before?" "Because they make sure kids like me disappear," he said. "I figured if nobody believed Ava, nobody would believe me either." Danielle turned to the jury. "But you believe him now, don't you?" The defense tried to discredit Jamal, bringing up his juvenile record, 2 detentions for skipping class and 1 for shoplifting. Danielle objected. "This isn't about character assassination. This is about patterns of abuse." Judge Vaughn agreed. "Keep the questioning relevant, counselor." Later that night, Derek and Danielle walked out of the courthouse into a wall of cameras. One reporter shouted, "Danielle, do you think the department will settle?" She paused. "I don't want a settlement. I want a reckoning." Back at her home, Ava sat curled on the couch, watching her mom on the evening news. "You look like a superhero," she whispered. Danielle crouched beside her. "Superheroes don't win alone. You're the reason I'm still standing." Ava smiled, her swelling reduced but still visible. "Then I guess we're both superheroes." Danielle kissed her forehead. "You more than me." But outside, things were changing fast. The police union began pushing back, accusing Danielle of conducting a personal vendetta. Anonymous blogs surfaced, trying to smear her past at the DA's office. Rumors flew that Judge Vaughn was being pressured to recuse herself. And then came the real twist. Danielle received an unmarked envelope containing surveillance photos, not of her, but of Ava. Recent ones. Ava at school, Ava at the grocery store. A note inside read, "Back off. This is your last warning." Danielle's hands trembled. She clutched the photos, staring at her daughter's innocent face. She picked up her phone and called a number she hadn't dialed in years. "Detective Leone speaking. It's Danielle Brooks. I need protection, and I need eyes on whoever's following my child." A beat of silence. "Understood. I'm on my way." The battle had moved off the courtroom floor, but Danielle wasn't backing down. She was just getting started. The morning after the envelope arrived, Danielle Brooks didn't take Ava to school. She packed a bag, made a few quiet calls, and by 9 a.m., she and Ava were checked into a secure safe house just outside Atlanta, a location provided by Detective Leone and monitored around the clock. Ava asked questions, of course, but Danielle offered only a gentle smile and said, "It's just until the trial's over, just a precaution." But inside, Danielle was seething. She knew what that message meant. It was the oldest tactic in the book, scare the witness by targeting their loved ones. They wanted her to back down, to take a settlement, to make it all quietly disappear. But threatening her daughter, that was a mistake they wouldn't recover from. In the courthouse, things were shifting fast. Word of the threat got to the judge, and while no names were mentioned, the mood was tense. More media outlets had latched onto the story. Protesters outside the courthouse now carried signs that read, "Protect Black children," and "Silence is violence." Support grew online, and so did the attacks. News anchors debated whether Danielle was grandstanding for political gain. But she wasn't watching the coverage. She was preparing to expose everything. That day, Danielle called to the stand, someone the defense never expected, Detective James Kilpatrick. A 26-year veteran of the Atlanta PD, Kilpatrick was now retired, and he entered the courtroom slowly, leaning on a cane, his face lined and tired. Danielle nodded respectfully. "Detective Kilpatrick, thank you for joining us." He gave a small smile. "Didn't come here for thanks. I came because it's time someone did the right thing." Gasps echoed through the room. She walked him through his history, commendations, leadership positions, and then paused. "Detective, during your tenure, did you ever witness Officer Callahan engage in misconduct?" Kilpatrick looked directly at the jury. "More than once." The courtroom broke into whispers. Danielle raised her hand. "Let the record reflect this is sworn testimony under oath." Kilpatrick nodded. "I warned Internal Affairs 3 times. Each time I was told to stand down, told it would hurt morale, told Callahan had friends higher up. And what happened after that? I was reassigned, put on desk duty, then pushed to retire early." Danielle let the silence speak for itself. The defense scrambled, arguing his testimony was irrelevant. But Judge Vaughn shut it down. The jury will hear every word. After court, Danielle and her team gathered in a war room, whiteboards, timelines, and folders stacked high. Marissa pointed to a document on the screen. "This is it. We've been circling this for weeks. Look, Callahan's brother-in-law is Deputy Chief Wallace." Danielle leaned in. Wallace. It made sense now. The internal cover-ups, the sealed reports, the shifting patrol assignments every time Callahan stepped out of line. "Get me everything on Wallace's involvement," Danielle said. "If there's a trail, we follow it." Derek frowned. "If we go after the deputy chief, they'll come at us harder." Danielle didn't hesitate. "Then let them." But there was more. Later that night, while Ava slept, Danielle reviewed one last file that Detective Leone had slid her earlier. It was slim, only 3 pages. But it changed everything. It was a memo, dated 6 months prior, about a grant funding application from the Atlanta PD. In it, they listed their excellent disciplinary record and 0 active civil rights investigations. The signature at the bottom? Deputy Chief Wallace. If Danielle could prove the department falsified that report while knowingly shielding Callahan, it wouldn't just be a civil case anymore. It would be federal. The next morning, she called in a favor from an old contact at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Jordan Hale, a former law school classmate now working in public integrity. "You sure about this?" Jordan asked after hearing the details. Danielle replied, "They threatened my child. They falsified federal documents. They let kids get hurt and buried the evidence. I'm beyond sure." By noon, a federal inquiry had been initiated quietly. And the trial? It marched on. Jamal Rivers returned to testify again, this time backed by school records showing he missed 14 days of class after his assault. The defense still tried to paint him as a troubled teen. But this time, Jamal stared them down. "You can say whatever you want," he said. "I know who I am now. I know what I survived." Danielle didn't need to add anything. The jury watched that boy, 17 years old and already battle-worn, stand taller than men twice his size. But just as they began to regain momentum, the defense pulled their next stunt. On day 4 of witness testimonies, a reporter leaked confidential medical records of Ava's post-incident treatment. The records were graphic, painful to read, and worse, obtained illegally. The courtroom was thrown into chaos. Danielle's hands shook as she clutched the report, knowing exactly what this meant. "They're trying to break me," she whispered. Marissa replied, "Or they're desperate. They know they're losing." Outside, the protests grew larger. Inside, so did Danielle's fire. That evening, as the courtroom emptied, she remained behind, alone, staring at the empty witness stand. This was where her daughter's pain had been put on trial. This was where the truth had started to rise, slowly, painfully, but rising nonetheless. Danielle turned toward the door, but before she left, she whispered to herself, "You're almost there, Ava. We're almost there." And somewhere in the shadows, someone was watching. Not just the court, not just the press, but someone who had a lot more to lose if Danielle won. The silence in the courtroom was sharp enough to slice through tension. Danielle Brooks stood with her hands clasped in front of her, eyes fixed on the judge as if willing the system itself to finally do what was right. Her calm exterior masked a war raging inside. It had been days of testimony, threats, press ambushes, and the steady erosion of privacy. And now the trial had reached a critical turning point. Across the aisle, Officer Callahan sat with his lawyer whispering frantically in his ear. His face, once cocky and composed, was tight with sweat. His eyes darted, rarely meeting anyone's gaze. He looked like a man who just realized he might not get away with it this time. Judge Vaughn's gavel came down with a dull thud. "We will now hear testimony from Ms. Brooks herself." The murmur that rippled across the gallery was immediate. Cameras clicked, reporters leaned forward, jurors shifted in their seats. Danielle approached the stand slowly. She adjusted the microphone with a steady hand and looked at the jury. "My name is Danielle Brooks. I'm an attorney, a mother, and for the last 6 weeks I've been fighting not just for my daughter, but for every parent who's ever been told to stay silent." Her voice didn't tremble. It rang. "I wasn't going to testify. I wanted the facts to speak for themselves. I wanted the experts and records to carry this case. But something changed. Someone released my daughter's private medical records. They tried to humiliate her. A child." She paused, voice thickening. "I won't let them twist her pain into silence." She turned toward Officer Callahan, then back to the jury. "You saw what he did. You saw the photos. You heard from doctors, teachers, even his own former partner. But I want to make sure you understand the human cost." Danielle described Ava's night terrors, her sudden aversion to male teachers, how she flinched when doors slammed. The courtroom was still. "She's 7. She should be dreaming about summer camp, not locked doors and patrol cars." Callahan shifted in his seat. Danielle's gaze pierced him. "And the system knew. You'll hear more tomorrow about Deputy Chief Wallace and the memo he signed, lying about internal investigations so they could qualify for federal funding." Gasps rippled through the room. "Yeah," she said, nodding. "They falsified paperwork to keep money flowing, and they left men like Callahan in power while kids like Ava paid the price." She sat down not because she was finished, but because that moment needed no addition. It had landed exactly where she aimed, right in the conscience of 12 citizens holding justice in their hands. That evening, back at the safe house, Danielle watched Ava fall asleep to the faint lull of cartoons. Marissa entered quietly, holding her phone up. "You need to see this." It was a leaked email, an internal exchange between Wallace and another city official. It was bad, worse than they imagined. Wallace had personally intervened to block a civilian review board investigation into Callahan 6 months prior. He'd referred to Danielle's civil suit as a PR nightmare and suggested finding leverage to get her to settle. It was clear now. The threat Danielle received, the release of medical records, the delays in court filings, all orchestrated. Danielle leaned back in her chair. "They're not just trying to win. They're trying to destroy me." Marissa nodded grimly. "But now we've got them." The next morning, the courtroom buzzed with new energy. Danielle handed the email thread to the court clerk and requested it be entered into evidence. Judge Vaughn squinted as he read it. His face stiffened. "Counselor," he said, voice taut, "this email implies deliberate obstruction of justice at the highest levels." "Yes, Your Honor." He turned to the defense table. "I want Deputy Chief Wallace in this courtroom, immediately." The defense lawyer paled. Danielle wasn't done. "Your Honor," she added, "we've also reached out to the Department of Justice. They are reviewing the use of federal grant money in connection to these falsified documents." Suddenly, this wasn't just a civil rights trial. It was federal. Callahan's lawyer requested a recess. The judge refused. In the hallway, reporters shouted questions. Danielle kept walking, Ava's picture tucked in her wallet, close to her heart. Inside the DA's office, the pressure mounted. Assistant DA Henry Long, who'd been silent up to this point, finally stepped into the light. He approached Danielle quietly as court recessed for lunch. "Just between us," he said, "I didn't know how deep this went. We've opened a parallel investigation. I can't speak officially, but if your team can keep pushing, there may be indictments." Danielle studied him. "You ready to take down your own department?" Henry looked over his shoulder toward the courtroom. "Justice first, loyalty second." That night, news broke. Deputy Chief Wallace had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. His office had been raided. The mayor's office released a statement pledging zero tolerance for corruption and abuse. Ava didn't know it yet, but her pain had cracked a wall wider than anyone expected. Danielle stood outside the safe house, staring up at the stars, the Georgia air heavy with humidity and hope. Tomorrow, Wallace would testify, and Danielle would be ready. Danielle's heels echoed across the marble floor of the courthouse like a war drum. Inside, the air was electric. Every seat was filled. Reporters lined the back wall, their cameras poised. Members of the public had shown up in droves, some holding signs with Ava's name, others simply there to witness justice in motion. Deputy Chief Ronald Wallace sat stiffly in the witness chair, a man who'd once walked into rooms with unchecked confidence, now looking like he was strapped to a grenade with the pin already pulled. The prosecutor approached slowly. "Deputy Chief Wallace, is this your email address?" Wallace nodded, throat tight. "Yes. And are you the author of this email sent on March 3rd to City Administrator Elena Hargrove, referencing the Brooks lawsuit as, quote, an emerging PR liability?" Wallace's lawyer shifted uncomfortably beside him. Wallace cleared his throat. "Yes. And in this email you advised against the activation of the Citizen Review Panel, correct?" "Yes," Wallace said, quieter this time. "Why?" Wallace's jaw twitched. "I didn't think it would be productive at that stage." "Isn't it true that a preliminary internal review had already found inconsistencies in Officer Callahan's report? That you chose to suppress that review?" Silence. "Deputy Chief, I was trying to protect the department," he said finally. "There were reputations at stake, careers." Danielle stood, her voice calm but cutting. "Your Honor, I request permission to question the witness directly." The judge nodded. "Proceed." She approached Wallace without breaking eye contact. "You weren't protecting reputations. You were protecting money. That DOJ grant came with a condition: zero tolerance for excessive force complaints. If the public found out about Callahan's prior offenses, the department could lose millions. Isn't that right?" Wallace looked down. Danielle pressed on. "So you buried the truth. You let a child suffer. You let a community burn to keep your budget clean." Wallace's lips parted, but no words came out. "You don't even deny it," she said. At that moment, something shifted. From the back row, someone stood up. It was Officer Marla Jennings, Callahan's former partner. She raised her hand. "Your Honor," she called out, "I'd like to speak." There was murmuring across the room. Danielle froze. Marla had gone quiet since giving her initial testimony days ago. For her to speak now, unsolicited, meant only one thing. The judge nodded slowly. "Approach." Marla stepped to the front of the courtroom and looked straight at Wallace. "I was there the night Ava was assaulted. I didn't stop it. I didn't report it the way I should have. I was afraid of losing my job. But I've read the emails. I know now that this wasn't just about one bad cop. It was about the people who let him stay bad." She turned to the jury. "You can't fix everything overnight, but you can start by holding the people in power accountable." Danielle met her gaze, surprised, but quietly grateful. Outside the courtroom, the city buzzed with updates. Every news channel carried the story. Wallace's testimony had exposed a long-buried pattern of corruption and suppression. Already, citizens were demanding reviews of other misconduct cases. The mayor's office was scrambling. But inside the courthouse, the work wasn't done. Danielle returned to her seat beside Ava, who was now sitting upright, more alert, watching the proceedings with wide but steady eyes. She squeezed her mom's hand. "Are we winning?" Ava whispered. Danielle looked at her daughter, this small, strong child who had survived more than most adults ever would, and smiled. "Not yet," she whispered back, "but we're finally being heard." That afternoon, the judge gavelled the court back into session. The jury had returned early. Everyone tensed. The foreperson stood. "We, the jury, find the defendants, Officer Sean Callahan and the Metro Heights Police Department, liable for all charges brought forth in the civil complaint, including the use of excessive force, falsification of records, and systemic misconduct." A breath seemed to release from the room all at once. Danielle didn't cry. She just exhaled. And Ava reached for her hand, but just when it seemed the day was done, Danielle's phone buzzed. A message from an anonymous source. "Check the city contracts. Follow the trail from Wallace to the mayor's campaign fund. It's bigger than you think." She stared at the message, her stomach tightened. Beside her, Marissa leaned in. "What is it?" Danielle turned the phone to show her. "It's not over," she said, "not even close." The camera lights flashed again. Reporters clamored. The gallery buzzed with voices. But Danielle stood still. She knew the courtroom win was just a battle. The war had just begun. The press conference room at City Hall was packed wall to wall. Microphones crowded the podium like a swarm of bees. Reporters jostled for position while television crews adjusted their cameras. But the moment Danielle Brooks stepped up to the mic, the room fell still. She wore a simple black blazer, no makeup, no flashy accessories, just her voice and the truth. "My daughter was beaten by the very people sworn to protect her. They tried to silence us, but we refused." Behind her, Ava stood proudly, one hand resting in her mother's. She still carried visible scars, but there was light back in her eyes now. And beside her stood Marissa Chen, Ava's pediatrician, and now Danielle's closest ally, and Marla Jennings, the officer who broke the silence when it mattered most. "The court heard us," Danielle continued, her voice unwavering. "They found Officer Sean Callahan and the Metro Heights Police Department liable. But this is not the end. This is the beginning." The crowd erupted in applause, not from the press but from the citizens gathered in the back. People from Ava's school, members of the local church, activists, parents, young students who had followed the case day by day like a lifeline. And yet, across the city, in the mayor's office, something darker unfolded. Mayor Gregory Langston stood in front of his flat-screen TV, jaw clenched as he watched Danielle's words echo across the nation. On his desk, a manila folder lay open. Inside were checks, contracts, emails. The connection between the police department's discretionary fund and his re-election campaign. Someone had leaked them. The same anonymous source that tipped Danielle all off at the end of the trial had provided damning evidence. The corruption wasn't just inside the department. It went all the way up to City Hall. Langston reached for the phone. "Get me Wallace," he barked. "Wallace is gone," his aide whispered. "He resigned this morning. Word is he's cutting a deal with the feds." For the first time, the mayor's confident facade cracked. Meanwhile, back in the conference room, a young reporter raised her hand. "Ms. Brooks, now that you've won, do you plan to return to federal law?" Danielle smiled, but not with triumph, more like purpose. "I never left it. I only paused. And yes, I'll be back. But this time, I'm not walking into a courtroom alone. I'm walking in with every family who's ever been told to be quiet, with every mother who's been made to feel powerless. She looked directly into the cameras. And if they think this ends with Ava, they're wrong. This isn't a moment. This is a movement. Ava squeezed her hand tighter. Later that evening, they returned home to a porch covered in flowers and cards. Strangers had left thank-you notes. Kids wrote Ava letters. And on the kitchen table sat a single envelope, no return address. Danielle opened it. Inside was a photo, black and white, slightly grainy, of a young black woman in handcuffs. The note beneath read, "She was arrested in 1996. No charges, no record, no justice. Please help us find her family." Danielle looked up at Marissa, who'd just stepped into the room. "They're already coming to us," she said quietly. "You going to answer?" Danielle nodded. All of them. In the days that followed, the city underwent a shift. A full DOJ investigation was launched into Metro Heights' Internal Affairs Division. Chief Bannister was placed on indefinite leave. Officer Callahan was arrested by federal agents for perjury and civil rights violations. And Mayor Langston? He was indicted on corruption charges after Wallace agreed to testify. Danielle didn't celebrate any of it, not publicly. Privately, one night, she sat on the edge of Ava's bed and watched her daughter sleep, a soft smile playing on her face. Then, finally, a tear slipped down her cheek, not from sadness, but from release. Justice hadn't restored what they lost, but it had stopped the bleeding. And maybe, just maybe, it could help others heal too. To our viewers, if this story moved you, if it made you feel seen or made you think about the justice we fight for every day, then stand with us. Share this story, talk about it. Demand better from the systems around you, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel, because we're not done, not even close. We're just getting started.